Let's talk about how critical initiatives, trying to get into the meat of this, are different from operational improvement. A critical initiative to me is something that's typically cross-organizational, time-sensitive, and it has an additional level of effort and or risk. And to some, that's an obvious statement, but when it comes to how you try to do one of these initiatives, often it's not taken for all that needs to be on each one of those levels. So let me talk about each one. This idea of cross-organizational. It requires a different level of leadership, understanding, and buy-in. Typically, organizations, to be efficient, you focus on what it is you do. So if you're the sales part of the company, you focus on sales. If you're the delivery part of the company, you focus on delivery. When delivery guys start trying to sell, the sales guys usually get upset, right? It's like, they just let us do the selling, you do the delivering. Okay, when the R&D guys try to mess with the manufacturing line, it's like, look, you get it done and then we'll put it into production. You want to be efficient and effective, you end up siloing your operations. Well, then something comes up that runs across the whole organization. And by definition then, it's an add-on job for everybody in the organization, right? It's not just, I know how to run my piece, I don't necessarily know how to engage people in the other areas in this same transaction. And that's where it starts to get a bit difficult. If it's within a silo or within a certain area of a company, typically the professional, now if you have a certain area of the company and it's not running well and it needs to be improved, you can probably look to the people who are in there or the structure in here, and it becomes obvious what needs to be done to improve that. I have the best salesperson I had who's now running sales, and it turns out he was a great salesperson. He's not a great sales manager. We need to increase. We need to invest in new technology in our production or whatever it is, or distribution or whatever it is, whatever kind of company you're in, because we're just behind the times and we need to be more effective. Those kind of decisions are operational decisions that you as leaders make every day, and it's pretty easy to see within your area. However, when you start to look between areas, that's where it gets difficult. Because something that may improve your efficiency may in fact hinder somebody else's. All right, so you decide that you need more information about something in which to make decisions. Well, the area of the company that gathers that information may not have the ability to do that. So because you're wanting something that you see is going to have a great effect, to another part it's going to have a great impact because they already had a full plate doing other things. And they don't know how to make those trade-offs, and they don't know how to do those things across the enterprise. Therefore, it requires a different level of leadership. If you start to expand, and I don't know how big the organizations are you either deal with or represent in this room, but if you get beyond well, I don't know what the size is. I think Drucker used to say you need professional management. You need to start being intentional about how the culture you build and the way you lead people when you have to start wearing name tags. When you've gotten so big you don't know everybody by your name, you've got to start putting things into place. If you're distributed or you're in multiple states or countries or whatever, then it's even more complex. And what happens then is you've got to lead by influence as much as you're leading by directive, right? Because I'm measured typically by what I do for a living. If I run a site, I'm measured by how I run this site. You're now asking me to do something different for the greater good. I understand the greater good. Maybe part of my compensation's tied to the greater good, but probably most of it's tied to what I do in my location. So by definition, the greater good takes a back seat, even though I'm going to tell you it doesn't, because I know this is an important initiative for all of us. So what happens, though, is you've got to really win the hearts and minds of people that say, I own this as much as I am doing it, because the ownership piece is what's going to get them to do more, to shift their priorities, to actually make sure they're not following the letter of the law, but the intent of what you're trying to do. In doing that, something that goes across an organization may challenge current processes, structures, policies, or roles. And this is where it gets really, where the rubber meets the road, as it were. You know, you start talking about doing something and suddenly, immediately somebody wants to know, are we doing layoffs? Or, you know, we're putting in this piece of technology. Well, why? Are we replacing people? What does this mean to us? What are we going to do? And sometimes roles become more unclear. Working with an organization, you know, when they start changing, for example, from independent offices to more of a regional structure. This is a services organization. They've grown by all these independent offices. And of course, now they have some very, very strong offices and some weak ones. In order to raise the value of the whole organization, they need to leverage things between offices. They're going to start to put in a regional model. Okay, you begin to put in a regional model. What does that do to the guy who's been running his own world in his city? You know, what does this mean to me? Do I have a new boss? Am I going to change things? What is this? The more you start to do it, it unravels things that if you're sitting as an executive team in the headquarters, you're not going to understand often all the impacts that are happening. Because it makes complete sense to you, you understand it, and I'll talk about this in a minute, and you're trying to communicate it out to the people who are actually impacted by the change, and it's never enough. And so what happens is an awful lot of these initiatives, it takes an additional level of leadership beyond day-to-day operations. Okay, an example of this. In any kind of systemic change, so this actually makes sense for almost any living organism, an ecosystem, anything like that, a rainforest, as well as human systems, organizations. All systems want to stay at a level of what's called homeostasis. It wants to stay flat, right? If there's even in a rainforest, if there's like a big fire or something, a lot of it burns out. The way things flow into it, it's taken this dip. Everything kind of flows to where it gets back up to normal. If you have a sales problem and all of a sudden your numbers dip, you're trying to do everything you can to get it right back up to where it was. Because this is the most efficient and effective an organization, at least the most efficient way an organization can run, right? Everything's moving like that. Well, what happens then is if you want to change this, is you come in here and you do some kind of event that has an impact in the system. It's going to take the system and it's going to bump it. So let's say you have an event where you bring everybody together and you think, hey, we're gonna embrace this new way of working, and all the leaders get on board and everybody's excited about it. And they see how it can work, and everything happens, and the system bumps, and it's like, this is the new us. This is what we're going to be. It's 2015. Here we go. What happens as soon as that meeting's over? It drops, not because it's wrong or people don't like it, because that's what effective systems do. It's going to drive it right back down to where it was because it's new and it's different. All right? And systems, by their very nature, to be effective, don't want different. They want the same. You know, you hire somebody that's going to be to optimize something. You know, they're gonna just, that's their job. I was on a panel one time with the head of innovation at the Mayo Clinic, and he said he went to speak about a month after he'd gotten the job, and he was talking at a conference, and he didn't know the CEO was actually speaking out, and a couple of speakers after him. And he talked about innovation, and he said, you know, I think my job as an innovator is to start brush fires. Just start a little spark that'll turn into a fire that, you know, we can flame it and it'll change the organization. And literally about 3 hours later, the CEO showed up, and he goes, well, you know, as CEO of a big hospital, he goes, my job, I'm basically a firefighter. And that really is the tension that happens. So what happens is you bump this event. What you have to do then is have another one and bump it, and another one. And if you keep having these, eventually the system says, oh, this is what we do now. This is a new level of fitness. This is the way things are, and the system adapts, and this becomes the new normal up here. Right? Now, so if you take Jack Welch, when he was at GE, he instituted something called Workout. And Workout were these sessions where you'd bring people in and you'd kind of brainstorm any big decision. And he felt it was really important to get buy-in from a lot of people and to get viewpoints from a lot of people. And he made the staff start to do workout sessions on big initiatives. Well, when they first did them, a couple people did them, and then we're going to go back to, I got other stuff to do, we'll just make the decision. And you would show up to present something to Jack, and he would say, well, have you done a workout on this? No, and they'd go back and they'd do it. Well, eventually, the workout became the normal way of doing things. Nobody presented something. You said, if somebody came to you with an idea, you go, that's a great idea, let's do a workout on it. That's the shift. It's not, this is something extra we have to do, this is something the old man wants. Is there any way we can do half a workout and get it done quicker and look like we've done it? It really begins to get embraced where somebody says, this is what we've got, let's run it by this process, we think it'll be better and move forward. And the system's adapted. The problem is, if you're an executive and you're running a company, this is where your focus is all the time, making things run. If you're trying to do this and something across the whole organization, your focus now needs to turn here on the intentionality of creating these events and moving the organization. And by definition, you can only be looking at one thing at a time. So if you're now looking here, who's running the ship? Right? And so the tendency is, and you may not know all the answers in that part. You know it's shifting, but you're not sure where it's going. It's very much easier to go back to what you do every day and look at your reports and manage things and do things. This is a new area. And so what happens is most executives in change or most teams in change get to maybe about here and they just get tired. They just say, that's good enough. And that's why most really large cross-organizational initiatives for all the professional stuff that strategy firms do, they come in and they give you the big deck and there's all this amazing stuff, or a big systems technology thing, put this in, it's going to go across your whole company and it's going to get great returns. The reason most of those returns and most of those things don't happen is because in the implementation of it, the changing of people that are doing its mindset, you get tired. Or you take your eye off the ball so much that then the company starts to suffer. So you've got to figure out a way that you can take the energy of the leadership team and those that are involved and focus them on this energy, intentionally drive them where you want and still maintain operation. Does that make sense? Does anybody any questions on this? Is this, yes, sir?
Describe an event.
Well, for example, let's just say a merger. I've known two companies that have merged to create a new level of fitness, and 6 or 7 years after that merger, they're still merging. All the synergy and the new things that we're going to do, they wanted to combine 2 + 2 was going to equal 10, and what they find is 2 + 2 is a whole lot more work just to make it equal 4. So that kind of event would be something that don't anticipate just because you signed the contract and merged that everybody's going to say, wow, we're getting along great now, and we're going to think how we leverage one another. That might be an event.
Would a new product introduction be considered an event then?
Yes, it could. The only thing with a product is it depends on how much it would impact the entire organization. If you're just now selling something new and it can still be sort of delivered by the silos, the salespeople now have one more thing to sell, the manufacturing line has one line dedicated to it, then it's not as much of an event because they can work that in. But if you said we were going to create a whole new product with a new set of services that's going to take us into an area where we're all going to have to handle clients instead of individuals or something like that, then it starts to have those impacts. Okay? So cross-organizational. They're often time sensitive. So if you have an issue, if sales are off or something's down or something, not just sales, that's not a good example because that's in a silo. If the performance of the whole organization is off, if you were in that curve and you feel, or the company knows whether they want to say it or not, they're over that turn, it's now time sensitive. It's headed in a direction that everybody knows it is, and you're starting to lose your best people, just whatever it is, it's time sensitive, you've got to do something quickly. The other thing is if it's expensive. You get a back in the day, the re-engineering was the big buzzword. If you did a big re-engineering initiative or a big technology thing across the whole organization, you're spending a lot of additional money on that. capital or expenses, and you want to get a return on that money as fast as you can. So it's not like you can just operationally improve this. We're going to continue to try to get better, and hopefully we'll be better soon, but if not, we're doing okay now. That's not this. This is, we just dedicated an extra $5 or $10 million to change our company, and we're going to spend that money, and my board's going to look at me, or my investors, or my, whoever it is are going to look at me and go, where's our payback for that $10 million? And we don't want it to be 10 years from now. So there's a time element on these things. Lastly, as I said over here, they're additional to normal operations. They require the additional funding. Often different metrics for success. If you're in an organization that does a lot of services and you want to change how your people interact with their clients, there may be how you measure may in fact be inhibiting them from how you want them to behave. And it was great measurements for what you're doing now, but now you want them to be different. You've got to think, we got to measure this differently. Or if you're thinking about just retention of people, and you're thinking, well, what do I measure? How am I going to know that I have a good organization that's helping retain people? It may be something different than you're doing today. And again, the additional effort and the additional level of risk. I mean, if you're gonna go to your investors and say, I need this money to do this, there's a risk in that. If you're gonna say, we've been selling here, we've been delivering this way, or we've been using this computer system, and now we're gonna do a new one, there's a level of risk in that. And so you're taking on additional risk. If you are already as a senior executive stressed by the risk level of what you're doing to try to get the returns where you're going to be, this is just, this pushes you right over the edge kind of thing. All that to be said, if that's the way critical initiatives are, that you have to think about them as something extraordinary to what you're doing, that they are going to take on additional effort, mindset, all those kind of things, it then says the way you operate as a team, you may need to think about your team a little differently as well.